It's 5:04 and welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. We start off with an update in the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals spent over 90 minutes yesterday afternoon debating the proper venue for Republican candidate Jefferson Griffin's challenge to ballots cast in the North Carolina's November the 5th Supreme Court election. Griffin is currently trailing Democrat candidate Allison Riggs by 734 votes. That's out of more than 5.5 million total cast in the contest, where a case is currently going on to keep the case in state court. There is a hearing scheduled for February the 7th. Meanwhile, Riggs and the State Board of Elections, as well as allied groups, argue for federal court jurisdiction, citing the case's implications for federal civil rights laws. The appellate court in Virginia must decide whether U.S. District Judge Richard Myers erred by remanding the case to state court all the way back on January the 6th. At issue are conflicting interpretations of federal and state authority in election disputes, with Griffin's camp emphasizing state law violations and Riggs's camp pointing to federal constitutional concerns. The case remains under a temporary stay that was issued by the North Carolina Supreme Court, which rejected Griffin's request to block disputed ballots, but returned the case to a Wake County trial court. That temporary stay means that the State Board of Elections cannot certify the election. Attorneys debated the broader implications of federal versus state court jurisdiction and the potential disenfranchisement of over 60,000 voters if Griffin's request to invalidate ballots is granted. Both sides emphasize severe urgency of resolving the case before this February the 7th date when it goes in front of a Wake County Superior Court, with Riggs's victory as the last uncertified race in the country that is currently being talked about. It's right here in North Carolina. We'll get some additional details on that with Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation. He'll join us coming up here in just a few minutes. It's now 5:07. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. After the November elections, we have some new members as part of the North Carolina Council of State. One of them is State Treasurer Brad Briner. He held a press call yesterday and gave us some insight as to what his office is going to be focusing on as he gets up to speed in that role as the state treasurer. To walk us through some of those details this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Teresa Opeka from CarolinaJournal.com to the News Hour this morning. Teresa, appreciate the time. Tell us about the press availability that the state treasurer had yesterday.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. So, yeah, he's got a full plate, Treasurer Briner. He says what they're doing and managing about over $250 billion across different parts of the Treasurer's Department. That ranges from the state health plan all the way to the pension plan. So he went through some of the details yesterday in the press call about what he is focusing on. And hopefully one of those things is giving a cost of living adjustment for retirees on the pension system. He's going to look into that. He said, it was a Boston College Center for Retirement Research. They had data that North Carolina ranks either 49th or 50th in investment performance. Now, he said that's crazy. That's ridiculous because we're doing so well as a state. We're always like in the top 10, number one for business, all of that. So what he said is they're a little conservative as far as the pension plan. And he said, we're not going to go crazy. We're not going to go nuts, not going to do cryptocurrency or anything of that nature, but they are going to take some steps possibly to expose to more equity in the terms of equity markets and cash and all of that. So they're looking at doing something like a step up, he said. We're not going all straight to the top, but taking a little more of a risk to ensure maybe more cost of living adjustments for the retirees. He also talked about the state health plan, that it is severely facing a crunch. And if I can pull up the number. So what he said, basically what it comes down to is they're looking for adjustments for people to pay possibly as little as $20 a month to as he didn't go up and say how high. They are going to have a state health plan meeting next month to go over all those figures, but he wants to base increases based on income. So probably as low as $20 per month, but it could go a little bit higher than that. So it's just taking a look at a lot of different things. The deficit is predicted to be over $507 million in 2026 for the state health plan. So it's increasingly significant. Health prices are going up for healthcare, all of that. So, people are gonna have to pay a little more out of pocket, hopefully not too much more. So he had a ton of things to talk about.
I want to start where you began with the retirement and cost of living. We've seen some back and forth, even some lawsuits even flying around in the state over whether the cost of living adjustments have been adequate in regards to state law, which kind of mandates the process if you're going to do that. And from what I'm understanding you're talking about here, Teresa, it's the pension program is essentially invested, and I guess to kind of boil it down, invested in the stock market. And from what I'm hearing from you and from the treasurer, maybe it's invested a little bit too conservatively, and maybe they need to loosen that up and again, not throw it into risky things like you mentioned, cryptocurrency, but something that's maybe gaining a little bit more for the state so that they can afford to pay out some of these additional higher cost of living adjustments. Again, for regular people, be the difference of putting your money in the stock market versus keeping it in a very low interest yield savings account, which is something that regular everyday people deal with day in and day out.
Right. Correct. And what he said, right now, the pension plan, the percentage of exposure is about 48% exposed to equity markets and about 52% to cash and fixed income. When he compared that to the average state pension plans in the U.S., it's roughly around 70% in stocks and private equivalents and about 30% or so in cash and fixed income. He says, so we've been a conservative state for many years. It's served us well, but they just need to tweak it a little bit and go up because he said they right now they wouldn't have to require over $1 billion of employer contributions into the pension plan. That's kind of where they're at too. So you got to look at it both ways. So yeah, like it's been conservative, it's been great, but you need to take a little more risk to make things a little more profitable and a little bit better for everybody.
And then wrapping up in regards to health insurance, we saw with the previous treasurer in Dale Folwell, he was taking the healthcare industry to task seemingly at every opportunity, whether it was a press call, a press release, speaking at an event. He was always talking about healthcare and the insurance. I presume to say that from this call yesterday that we'll see some of those similar things with Treasurer Bryner, or do you think we'll maybe see a little bit of a step back from that?
I think it'll be about the same. As you mentioned, Treasurer Falwell, he would call them the cartels. He always had that as the nickname for the healthcare cartels, and rightly so, when the way you would deal with plans and what they were charging. So I think Bryner's going to continue on that same track. Like they're looking at what they called it's the Clear Pricing Project. That's part of what they were trying to get some providers to come into that program, but they weren't required. So they're going to try to take a look into helping people, on the state health plan, maybe possibly get more savings, looking to how they can actually make that a requirement as far as reimbursement. So it seems like he is going to stay in the same vein as former Treasurer Falwell when it comes to that.
Teresa, it's a great update this morning. We don't have a time to get into everything that Treasurer Bryner mentioned. Where can folks get more details this morning?
They can head on over to carolinajournal.com and check out our Twitter page. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere, but primarily it's carolinajournal.com and also our Facebook page.
Teresa Opeka joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:14, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time for a look at traffic on a Tuesday morning. We'll get an update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Former North Carolina State Treasurer Dale Folwell will not face charges after Wake County District Attorney Lauren Freeman concluded an investigation into his alleged misuse of a state vehicle. The investigation, which was launched by the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, that's the NCSBI, in March of 2024, stemmed from a compliance review by the Department of the Administration, which handles things like motor fleets divisions here in the state, all state-owned and operated vehicles. It revealed that former Treasurer Folwell used state-owned vehicles for state business while taking minor personal detours. While these detours did violate the motor fleet management policy, Freeman determined that they were not significant enough to warrant prosecution. The investigation also noted that Folwell had received an email in 2020 suggesting travel logs were not required, contributing to the misunderstanding that took place. However, former State Treasurer Folwell reimbursed the state $6,233.60 for commuting costs during the period under review. Folwell cooperated fully with the investigation, emphasizing his commitment to transparency and effective use of taxpayer resources. In statements, he expressed a focus on improving the process for the benefit of North Carolina taxpayers and explained that his travel was conducted to maximize job efficiency. You can read some additional details this morning on that story by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 522, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We've got an update for you this Tuesday morning on the race between Allison Riggs and Jefferson Griffin, the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court. Oral arguments taking place in the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals yesterday. To attempt to walk us through what we heard over about a 90-minute period of time, Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Mitch, it was a lengthy 90 minutes up in Virginia where these oral arguments took place. What do you make of what you heard from both sides and from the judges sitting on the bench?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what the Fourth Circuit says. If people happen to listen to it, they heard a lot of jargon, a lot of reference to precedents, but without explaining what the case was or what it said. Basically, this was designed to be an argument among lawyers and legal scholars, so it was hard for the average person to follow. But if you could glean a little bit from what's being discussed, really the issue here for the Fourth Circuit is whether Chief District Judge Richard Myers in North Carolina's Eastern District was correct or not when he decided that this case belongs in state court and not in federal court. The Jefferson Griffin, the Republican candidate in the Supreme Court race, filed an action with the state Supreme Court on December 18th. The next day, the State Board of Elections had the case removed from state court to federal court. And then a little while later, on January 6th, Chief District Judge Myers looked at the case and said, look, this is not something for me to deal with. I'm going to abstain from having the federal courts look at this and send the case back to state Supreme Court. And he did it very quickly. Within the same day that he announced it, the letter was in the mail on its way back to the state Supreme Court, and thus the state Supreme Court had a chance to act on the case the following day. Well, while that process was taking place, the State Board of Elections appealed Judge Myers' decision to the Fourth Circuit. So that's what the Fourth Circuit is dealing with. Did Judge Myers make the right or wrong decision to send this case back to state Supreme Court? And really, much of the 90 minutes of argument was about whether Judge Myers made the right decision. If he did, or if he didn't make the right decision, what is the remedy that the Fourth Circuit can move forward with? The Fourth Circuit could go back to Myers and say, you made the wrong decision, but then what happens next? That was one of the key points for the lead appeals court judge, Paul Niemeyer, an appointee of George H.W. Bush, which means he's been on the court for a long time. And he was saying, well, if we agree with everything that the State Board of Elections and Justice Allison Riggs are saying in this case, what do we do? I mean, do we send an order to the district judge, Richard Myers, and say, try to get the case back, try to order the case back? If so, and the case comes back, Do we overrule what the state Supreme Court has done since it got the case back? Because it issued a temporary stay, which remains in place, blocking the certification of this election. But it also ended up dismissing the writ of prohibition request that Jefferson Griffin had. So he's saying, maybe we don't get the case back at all. And in fact, Judge Griffin's lawyer in this case, Will Thompson, said this case is moot by the very fact that the state Supreme Court got rid of the writ of prohibition that Jefferson Griffin was asking for. There's nothing left for the Fourth Circuit to decide, and the case is moot. Now, appeals court judge Toby Heitens, who was an appointee of Joe Biden, really hit back on Will Thompson on a lot of this and saying, no, there's still cases. The abstention that Judge Myers used in this case didn't seem to make sense, didn't fit with precedent. If you bring the case back, all you have to do is say, Judge Myers, you get the case back and deal with it. And that could happen while the state Supreme Court is doing what it's doing. A couple of the lawyers said that they thought that if the Fourth Circuit ordered Judge Myers to take the case back, as soon as he takes the case back, anything the state Supreme Court did would be null and void. It'll be interesting to see whether the Fourth Circuit goes along with these arguments. It was unclear after the 90 minutes how they're going to rule.
Well, and that's what I want to bring up in this whole argument of whether or not they can even take the case back. In the waning minutes of the arguments, they talked about a case from New Jersey where a federal court asked for a case back, and the judge in New Jersey said, no, I'm keeping the case here. So there seems to be a lot of ambiguity, Mitch, whether they can even do this, or Judge Myers or the Fourth Circuit can even demand the case back. And as you walked us through last week, there's another level of this. It's now in Wake County Superior Court. So there's now like a fourth level to all of this. It's a really messy situation.
Yeah, that's right. It's not in the Supreme Court right now. So if the Fourth Circuit orders Judge Myers to do anything other than retake the case, who does he retake the case from? Because his order would go to the state Supreme Court where he sent the case, but the state Supreme Court doesn't have the case anymore. It's now in Wake County Superior Court. And we should point out that over the weekend, the Superior Court issued an order setting out its schedule. So if the case proceeds in state court, we now know that there is an upcoming proceeding fairly soon dealing with this case at the trial court level, which is what the state Supreme Court said had to be done, that Jefferson Griffin should not have gone straight to the state Supreme Court. He should have gone to the trial court level, the Superior Court. And so as all of this is going on at the Fourth Circuit, Jefferson Griffin is scheduled to issue a brief to the Superior Court on Wednesday. And then the following Monday, the State Board of Elections, Allison Riggs, anyone else who wants to be a party can file their briefings. And then on February 7th, a week from Friday, there's going to be a hearing in the Superior Court with likely some sort of ruling shortly afterward that would try to get some sort of resolution on this. Now, maybe to short circuit that process, we heard at the Fourth Circuit yesterday that Allison Riggs' lawyer wanted the Fourth Circuit to issue some sort of ruling before February 7th. And my guess is that he's looking for some sort of ruling that would short circuit the Superior Court moving forward with something. Because remember, part of the debate here is whether this whole issue should be decided. The whole issue of the election and whether ballots are going to be thrown out or kept in should be decided at a state court level or at the federal court level. Some want it decided at the federal court level by Judge Myers, and if they don't like his ruling, by the Fourth Circuit. Others want this to be decided by the Wake County Superior Court, and if they don't like that ruling, by the state Supreme Court ultimately. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next several days and maybe even weeks.
We'll continue the conversation with Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation coming up after this. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:30, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time for another look at the roadways on this Tuesday morning. An update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you. hot.
And welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's 5:36, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Taking a look at some news out of Washington, D.C. this morning. U.S. Senator Ted Budd has reintroduced the Protect Our Law Enforcement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement Act of 2025. This move comes after President Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. Thousands of illegal immigrants, including a Haitian gangster, have been deported after Trump's first week in office. The passage of the Laken Riley Act included an amendment requiring U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to detain any illegal alien who assaults law enforcement. Budd said in a press release when reintroducing this legislation on Friday of last week, quote, "One of the best ways we can support law enforcement officers and protect the public is by deporting dangerous people who do harm to them. If a migrant commits a crime of assaulting an officer or other first responder, they should be subject to immediate deportation. Our lawmakers must always have the backs of men and women who protect and serve our communities. We must act on this vital proposal." The act would further strengthen federal law by explicitly making assault of a law enforcement officer, firefighter, or other first responder a deportable offense. But Budd led this same act in the 118th Congress and twice pushed for its passage in the Senate. In a March speech on the Senate floor of last year, he said that the country was in the middle of the worst border crisis in U.S. history. He said at the time, quote, "The story of this crisis is one of preventable tragedies compounding day after day. And sadly, we've seen it in North Carolina less than 2 years ago when Wake County Deputy Sheriff Ned Byrd was killed in the line of duty. He was murdered by illegal aliens who should have never been in the country. Byrd was killed in August of 2022 by two brothers from Mexico. One of them escaped a prison in Virginia in April of 2023 and fled to Mexico, where he is currently fighting extradition to the United States. Budd added that any senator who claimed to support the police should have no problem supporting his amendment, which would have attached this act to a partial government funding package. That was at the time back last year. Both times he was blocked by the former Democrat Senate majority. Obviously, Republicans did not have control of the Senate last year. The 2025 bill is co-sponsored by Republican senators, including Tom Tillis. Some other individuals include Ted Cruz, Bill Hagerty, James Langford of Oklahoma, as well as Kevin Cramer of North Dakota. The House bill, House Resolution 31, is currently being led by Republican Andrew Garabino out of New York. So this is working its way in both chambers of Congress, the House and the Senate. However, the Senate version here being reintroduced by U.S. Senator Ted Budd. Obviously, immigration has been a hot topic over the last week since Trump made his way back to the Oval Office. We'll continue to track this piece of legislation and to let you know if there is any significant movement on it over on our website, carolinajournal.com, and right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:39, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Continuing our discussion with Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation this morning about the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court. Well, and something you just touched on that's pretty interesting there to note is that there was even some additional discussion about taking certain parts of the case back that dealt with more of the federal questions on things like voter ID or not voter ID, but voter registration and issues surrounding that, which some of the judges in the Fourth U.S. Circuit seem to maybe indicate maybe that's the way that they were leaning, indicating maybe this case is kind of split into two pieces, federal questions and state questions. Mitch, it seems like for a period of time there was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but maybe we've just kind of put the car in reverse because it seems like there's a lot more that's going to come out of this in as you noted, the coming weeks and maybe even months.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot more that can happen. And remember that once the case was sent back by the state Supreme Court to the trial court level, there are actually three different lawsuits. And the three different lawsuits deal with each of the three types of protests that Jefferson Griffin has put forward. For those who haven't been following it very closely, just a quick reminder, he is challenging more than 65,000 ballots that were cast in the election. And he says if these ballots are thrown out, his 734 vote deficit to Allison Riggs is likely to go away, and he would be the winner. He had 3 different categories of protests that were before the State Board of Elections, and now each one of those categories of protests has its own lawsuit. Now, it looks as if the Superior Court is going to lump all 3 of those together in one case, but there was some discussion about the Fourth Circuit about, wait a minute, do we deal with that case? Do we deal with all of those cases together with this case, which the case that was just in front of them was on only issuing a writ of prohibition against the State Board of Elections, which the state Supreme Court has already dismissed. And that's one of the reasons why Griffin's lawyer says, hey, the case before you is moot. It's already been decided. It will be very interesting to see where the Fourth Circuit goes. And once that happens, how that affects the state court proceedings in this debate.
This is obviously a little far out to talk about, but seems to me to be kind of the next logical steps. Some court is going to rule, and in this case, we've got at least the timeline for the Superior Court here in North Carolina. Mitch, do you think it's fair to say this morning that regardless of which side the Superior Court comes down in Wake County, that will likely be appealed to the state Supreme Court, and they'll likely have at least portions of this case back, or could have portions of this case back even after some decision is made after February 7th?
It will almost certainly be appealed. Whether there will be an appeal to the Court of Appeals, which is the next level, or if they'll try to bypass it straight to the state Supreme Court, that remains to be seen. But whatever happens, it's likely that this will not be resolved by February 11th, which is the day the state Supreme Court comes back and starts hearing cases again. You'll remember that Allison Riggs had hoped that there would be some sort of finality before she returns to the bench on February 11th, because as this is unresolved, she continues to sit on the state Supreme Court and Jefferson Griffin continues to sit on the State Court of Appeals. And my guess is that you're not going to see any sort of final ruling before February 11th. And at best, you might see some sort of ruling from the Fourth Circuit about whether Judge Myers in the Eastern District gets the case back or not. And perhaps you could get some sort of ruling from the trial court level in the state court system about whether Jefferson Griffin's protests are going to move forward or not. But in terms of wrapping up all of the appeals, that would almost certainly go well into that second full week of February and probably beyond.
Mitch, it's a very complicated, very tricky situation. Appreciate you walking us through it this morning. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:44, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at your Tuesday morning commute. We'll get the update with the great Boomer Von Cannon.
Nick, thank you, sir.
Good morning again. It's 5:50. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. Two counties in North Carolina have been selected to pilot an artificial intelligence school safety program. That pilot could soon be installed and introduced to all public schools across the state to enhance security measures for student safety. The General Assembly has allocated $3.2 million to New Hanover County and $2 million to Davidson County. That's for this initial pilot program. The grant was outlined late last year at the end of the General Assembly's 2024 session, and the legislation reads as follows, quote, "Funds allocated for the pilot program shall be used for the implementation of a school safety system that integrates AI technology into existing cameras, video management systems, and alerting protocols. The school districts will use the funds to integrate advanced AI into school safety systems capable of detecting a range of security threats, including threatening objects, intruders, open doors, and instances where individuals may be injured. If the AI security system detects a threat through the school's existing camera system, the technology then can tag and track that person or threat as it moves, while also alerting appropriate parties like law enforcement and school leaders." In an interview with CarolinaJournal.com, Senator Steve Jarvis of Davidson County, who had been involved in driving the effort forward, pointed to recent school shootings that worry many parents as a reason for heightened security. He explained that the system can detect objects like firearms as well as smoke from firing from a fire or vaping, as well as a fight with a large crowd starting to gather. Jarvis told the Carolina Journal, quote, "It's a very robust system. It's been used in the World Games, of course. They use it in airports. They use it in many other areas of government. And I just think it's time that we put our kids at the forefront, and school safety is paramount. If you think about it, from a security system, you have, say, 50 to 100 cameras on a school campus. Even if you have a person monitoring those cameras, they can't take a break. They can't physically monitor all of the cameras at all times. This system will monitor 24/7. The program's progress and outcome will be reported to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee. That will happen sometime in January of next year, so this is going to be rolled out this year. In January of 2026, it will be reported back, with details on participating schools, expenditures of the funds, and the impact on school safety. Jarvis expects a statewide rollout of the system to come following the program's completion. He told Carolina Journal, quote, "We would like to see the pilot move forward and be able to implement statewide if the report comes back, which we think it probably will in a favorable way." New Hanover and Davidson counties are expected to begin implementations of identical systems in the coming months, but first each school board must finalize an implementation plan. The New Hanover County School Board does meet today to discuss the program, and the Davidson County School Board has a meeting coming up next Monday, February 3rd, where they will discuss and vote on a plan as well. The grant does require the districts to come up with a contract with a software vendor that offers performance capabilities, including threatening object detection, intruder detection, person down detection, door opening detection, as well as tagging and tracking individuals in cameras and other searches such as license plate readers. Some people, however, have raised serious privacy issues about artificial intelligence and these systems constantly monitoring students, particularly the use of facial recognition technologies in school. Polly Leonard, who is a concerned citizen whose kids attend Davidson County schools, expressed some concerns with the technology while condemning what she heard as a, quote, "all hands on deck money grab within a disaster relief bill." She said, "It concerns me with this level of AI that they're wanting to implement, that we're living in a police state within the school system. We have over 900 cameras in the Davidson County schools, but nobody mans the camera systems. Nobody watches what is actually going on with the cameras. Why are we spending money when we already have cameras? You just need to put people in front of them." Though the legislation states that the chosen system must offer all capabilities, it does not mean that all school districts must use all of those capabilities. Senator Jarvis noted that Davidson County has chosen to forego using a facial recognition and license plate reading technology, but the system will still have to have that capability to be utilized in this pilot program. He said facial recognition is not being used. It could be used according to the Parents' Bill of Rights. There is an exception for safety, but Davidson County has chosen to not use facial recognition. Even if you didn't use it, all of the data is being housed on a server that is in the school. No data is going outside of the school, and after so many hours, just like video feed currently is, it will automatically be overwritten. The system searches the database according to specific instructions, such as identifying various individuals, and will only detect what it is directed to search for. Obviously, you've heard a lot in the last couple of years about the rise of artificial intelligence, AI, and it is being used in many different platforms. In this case, we're talking about a pilot program coming out of the General Assembly with, again, 2 school districts really at the kind of the tip of the spear here. You've got Davidson County Public Schools and New Hanover County Public Schools that are getting this initial test of the program. We'll see what those Board of Educations do in regards to implementing the software, and we'll likely get some updates throughout the year from these 2 school systems. Brianna Kramer continuing to track those details over at CarolinaJournal.com this morning. She'll track it. We'll provide updates as soon as we get them right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Well, we are expecting a busy day in the North Carolina General Assembly coming up tomorrow. The House and the Senate will both be back in Raleigh really to kick off the 2025 legislative session. Plus, the House Select Committee on Helene Recovery is set to meet tomorrow afternoon. We'll keep a close eye on that. Plus, we'll continue what is School Choice Week across the state of North Carolina. We have a new Carolina Journal poll that is out today. We'll recap those details tomorrow morning right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. That's going to do it for a Tuesday edition. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.